If Ohio State loses to Michigan, it'd be a disaster for the Buckeyes. I can't see it happening, though.
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth. Realignment, coaching carousel, the portal, and more. We've always got you covered. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Jay Stevens, Locked On Ohio State, joining me here to begin today's show. We'll check in on a couple other Big Ten teams today. USC wanting to dodge LSU. I have thoughts there, and where Wisconsin fits into this Big Ten discussion. But let's start with the game that is usually the most watched regular season college football game every single year, Jay. It's the game. It's Ohio State, Michigan, and Buckeye fans would probably prefer I don't bring up what has happened the last few times these teams have met, so I shall not. Michigan fans aren't going to like what I have to say here. I cannot see Ohio State losing this game. My reasoning goes something like this. Number one, Ohio State has a better roster top to bottom. Number two, they have a more proven head coach, though I think Sherrone Moore can do just fine at Michigan. And number three, they're at home after losing to Michigan 3 years in a row, after a long run of beating them many a times. For the guys who are returning, which there are a lot of guys on this Ohio State team back from last year's team, their motivation level, Jay, to me, has to be through the roof to win this game. This feels like the number one circle game on Ohio State's schedule, as it often is, if not every single year. What do you make of what I just said?
Yeah, it's a no-brainer. They got to win the game. They should win the game. I'm almost close to saying they will win the game. I'm not there yet saying they will because of
I am there. I am there if you are not.
Yeah, I try not to because when I do that, I assume. We all know what happens when you assume things. So no, this team is built in a way to beat Michigan, to do something they have not done since 2019. Would have happened in 2020, but the COVID got in the way of those two teams playing. But yeah, no, this team. So somebody was talking about Ohio State's defense. They written the comments on Locked On Buckeyes, and I don't normally read the comments because y'all are idiots. And I will say this again: somebody made an idiotic comment, and they said, "Oh, Jim Knowles, his defense couldn't stop Michigan last year." And I wanted to be like, "Hey, you idiot! It wasn't the defense's problem. Old boy threw an interception, and it really wasn't the quarterback's fault on that play. If they just go down and do what they did against Notre Dame in the final seconds of the Michigan game, they win that game." And Jim Knowles' defense gets praised for how they played in that game. So you got the defense, got Knowles. I don't like idiots, man. Sorry. If you identify as an idiot, let's try to figure out how to not be that. This is normally not how I am spiritual on the show, but I just don't like idiots. And there's idiots in the comments. But no, this game should easily be Ohio State winning it. The offense should be able to do a whole lot better, be more consistent than they were a year ago. Not just in that game, but all year long. But for Ryan Day, his job might be on the line if they lose that game, which is why I think he has put the coaching staff together this offseason and acquired the guys in the portal that he got.
I find that to be a fascinating conversation, because if Ryan Day were to go 11-1, make the playoff and win a playoff game or two, but the one loss somehow is to Michigan, would anyone actually have the temerity? This is why college football is the best, because that's not even a discussion in the NFL. You make the playoff, you win a playoff game or two. Even like if Michigan ends up going 9-3 this year, doesn't make the playoff. Ohio State's 11-1, but they lose to Michigan, and Ryan Day wins a playoff game, and he's in the semifinals for the national championship. That anyone could actually suggest his job should be in jeopardy is crazy to me. But I also understand it. I'm a fan. I have a team. My team has lost to its arch rival 3 times in a row. It doesn't feel great.
No.
It does not feel great. And one of the beefs that Michigan fans had with Jim Harbaugh for many years was can't beat Ohio State. And sometimes it just takes a little bit of time. But another reason that I can't see Ohio State losing this game is it's at home. Vegas has got this as a pretty sizable point spread at 9.5 in favor. That's according to our friends at FanDuel. 9.5 in favor of the Buckeyes. I have seen larger point spreads have the underdog win the game outright. So it's not impossible. But Ohio State's quarterback questions are different than Michigan's quarterback questions. Ohio State's quarterback questions are which guy is the best, whereas at Michigan it feels like which guy is the least not good. You know what I mean? Like you have a bunch of guys and you're like, I don't really know. I know what Will Howard is. And if there are guys pushing him, that means that there are guys who are more ready to play than you might think. But in Michigan, I have more questions about that room than Ohio State. So that with the home field advantage factor and the motivation going into this game, that's why I feel so confident that Ohio State wins and why I want to talk about it on today's show, because it's one of the most interesting matchups every single year, and this one is no different.
The quarterback conversation is going to be very interesting this offseason. We're going to do a whole lot more conversations about that on Locked On Buckeyes, comparing the two rooms. Because the last time I looked at Michigan's quarterback room and I thought, well, neither guy is that good. One of them came out to be J.J. McCarthy, who I still don't think is as good as people thought he currently is. Played better than I thought he could, a little bit better, but it's still not anywhere close to the caliber of quarterback at Ohio State. And I think there's an argument to be made that, well, is Kyle McCord really that bad if J.J. McCarthy is this? Like, if J.J. McCarthy is this, is Kyle McCord really that bad? That's something you can think about. I know McCord's gone, but that's just conversation. Ohio State's quarterback room is very interesting because I still think Will Howard's the guy. Regardless of what anybody else in that room is, I think it's still Will Howard. But when you factor in what you said so well, if somebody else comes in and wins a job, even though Will Howard is the most experienced guy, he's won a conference title, he's done a lot of good things in the sport. If somebody else comes in and wins this job, that simply says they're more ready, they're better, and they're the right quarterback to lead the team in the future. And I feel comfortable if it was somebody else, not just because Ryan Day's the head coach, but because Chip Kelly just got on campus, and Chip Kelly is one of the best offensive minds the sport has ever seen. So if Chip Kelly says, hey, this is my guy, I'm ready to go with him.
So in this segment, we have managed to lay out, from my side of things, why I don't think Michigan can win this game. You have managed to take a shot at J.J. McCarthy and brought up Chip Kelly at all. I bet you the comment section is going to be dead quiet, Jay. I bet you no one's going to have any thoughts on anything that we just said, which is just the way I'm kidding. Drop all the thoughts, of course, because I don't know if Michigan fans are big fans of mine, and I don't really know what I said to upset them other than you might not make the playoff this year, and now, of course,
you're going to lose to Ohio State. That's it right there. Spencer said
that's
Michigan's
true.
going to lose to Ohio State. That's all he said, and Michigan fans blow up his comments.
Well, there are a few games that I feel strong enough to make a prediction about in June. Alabama over Western Kentucky. I feel very confident that Alabama is going to win that game. Texas over somebody, they're 35.5 point. But in terms of like big games, like Florida, Miami, I don't have a pick on Florida, Miami right now.
But he has a pick on Oregon, Ohio State. I can tell you that right now. He already has a pick.
I do have a pick on Oregon, Ohio State. That is one of the few that I also feel good about. Or, like Texas A&M, Notre Dame. I don't have a pick on Texas A&M, Notre Dame right now, or any of the other big games that we'll continue talking about here on the show. But this is one where I'm logging in here. This show is for June 3rd, 2024. Ohio State over Michigan. I'm sorry, Wolverines fans. That's just the way that it goes. Jay Stevens, Locked On Buckeyes. Check him out on YouTube, whether you like him or not. I like him quite a bit. That's why we bring him by. Jay, thanks for coming on the show.
My God, I can't wait to do it again.
USC didn't want to play LSU. Yeah, I think they're pretty smart. That's coming up next. This episode is brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses find a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. That's why 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back to the Defend Lincoln Riley show. That's what this show is just slowly but surely becoming. So this report was flying around a couple of days ago, and I wanted to address it because I have thoughts, shall we say, as is usually the case, hence the nature of this very show. So USC apparently didn't want to play LSU in Las Vegas this year in the Vegas Kickoff Classic. It's a Sunday kickoff. It'll be on ABC. It's at Allegiant Stadium, neutral site. And they didn't want to play that game. And if you just looked at that on the surface, you'd go, wow, they're scared of LSU. You mean a program that won a national championship 5 years ago? Okay, well, I mean, there are less intimidating programs that if you were scared of, I'd be judging you. LSU is not exactly one of them with Brian Kelly going into year 3. But when you look at the rest of USC's schedule, having LSU on there, yeah, it could bolster it if you get a win. Heck, I feel decent about USC's chances in that game. But if you're poo-pooing on Lincoln Riley for wanting to get out of this game, I don't think you're looking at the larger context here, because this is I'm going to read you the rest of USC's schedule without the LSU game in there. Utah State at home. By the way, they have a perfect alternation. It's kind of satisfying to look at, of home and road. Utah State home, at Michigan following a bye. Host Wisconsin. We're talking about them later in the show. At Minnesota. That's October 5th. Host Penn State. At Maryland. Host Rutgers. At Washington. Host Nebraska. That's the stretch right there. Maryland, Rutgers, Washington, Nebraska. Where if USC goes 4-0, they're probably going to be in pretty good shape. Then they go at UCLA. So frankly, that's a stretch where they could go 5-1. I expect them to at least go 4-1 in those games. They end the year hosting Notre Dame. So their home slate has got a lot of big games. Penn State, Notre Dame, Wisconsin. Big, big games to be played at the Coliseum. If I just read you that schedule and then threw in, I don't know, an FCS opponent, which they don't have on their schedule, which I commend them for, by the way. I mean, a lot of teams do. I understand why. Makes a lot of sense. USC does not have that here. You can't tell me that USC's dodging anybody or that USC, I mean, they tried to, but of course they didn't. Can't tell me that USC doesn't have a strong schedule, because they do. USC is foregoing a bye game, an easy win, a 1-0 automatic start to the year to play a big-time nationally televised game. And they couldn't get out of it. But if I put an FCS opponent in there, that is still a really hard schedule. And I've been high on USC this offseason because I like the transfer moves. I like the defensive coordinator change. And Lincoln Riley's still a good head coach. I know I'm supposed to think he's the village idiot. I just don't hold that particular belief. So the rest of that schedule is fairly daunting. It works out well in that their toughest games end up being at home. But this isn't even a home and home with LSU. This is a neutral site game. You're not playing this at the Coliseum. You're not going to Death Valley so that they can then show up to the Coliseum next year. This is just a one-off game that they're just playing. And so when you think about them trying to get out of it, how exactly is that different than, let me think. Let me think if I can picture a team that got out of a non-conference battle that would have been tougher and it worked out. Oh, that's right, the team that just won the national championship. You can dislike schedule manipulation all you want. And hey, I don't know if there's a bigger critic of college football scheduling out there in this landscape than myself. I think it's patently absurd. I commend USC for having this absolute gauntlet of a schedule that has their win total at 7.5. They are, I think, an 8.5 or 9.5 caliber team in terms of what their preseason win total should be. But they've got a really, really tough schedule here. And yeah, the road games, not as tough other than going at Michigan. No, at Washington, that's not going to be a cakewalk. I think USC is a better team and they probably win that game in November. But that LSU game doesn't need to be there. It's not giving, it's just another opportunity for them to lose. And they don't need it to bolster their non-conference slate because they play Notre Dame the last week of the regular season. They always play Notre Dame. And I think that's fine. But then you don't need to play LSU because I do get annoyed at what Michigan has been able to do the last couple of years. They canceled a home and home with UCLA. There would have been at least some interesting games in there, and they canceled them, and they scheduled some cupcakes, and then UCLA and Michigan were just coasting through their non-conference slates. That's not good for college football. I don't like that. But USC is playing its conference schedule, a 9-game slate, and they have a high-quality non-conference opponent in there. My standard baseline expectation for a major power school, for me to not rip on your non-conference slate, is you can have one FCS, one group of 5, and one legit Power 4 or Power 5, back in the previous years when talking about all this sort of stuff. USC's accomplished that. Utah State, group of 5. Could have swapped out LSU for, I don't know, Eastern Washington. I don't care. You got Notre Dame on this slate. You can't say they're trying to set up some cupcake schedule. That's the first angle. The second angle I come at this with is, how many times have we seen schedule manipulation work out over in the SEC? They have some ACC non-conference matchups that make for some difficult football games, to be fair. But the late season cupcake has drawn the ire of many a college football pundits over the years, including Joel Klatt, not limited to him. Josh Pate's talked about it. Everybody's talked about it because it's ridiculous, right? And they take the heat for it. But guess what? They still get to do it, and it works, and they get that essentially bye week late in the season when everybody else is playing a legitimately tough opponent. It's absurd. It's absurd. So I don't think it's out of bounds for USC to say, can we manipulate our schedule a little bit? Because if I win that game, great, but I'm going to get a lot more flack for a loss to begin the season than I am credit for a win because of the rest of the schedule. USC's not going to go 12-0. Not going to happen. And getting wins, it matters a lot to the fans. It matters a lot to the donors. It matters a lot to the athletic department. And that game, it's a one-off. It is a one-off game. I don't know when they knew they were going to play Notre Dame, what exactly they were thinking that they wanted to play LSU as well. Again, I commend them for doing it, but tactically, does it make a lot of sense? No, it absolutely does not, because you have a tough enough schedule. You have enough quality opponents on there. If you beat Notre Dame and you beat either Michigan or Penn State, you're going to have 2 wins against top 10, 15 caliber teams this season. And that's more than enough. Wisconsin could be all right. Washington could be okay. I think Nebraska could be pretty good. Like your RPI, your strength of schedule is going to be respectable with or without that game. Now, the upside and the shred of optimism I will give the Trojan fans here is that if they beat LSU in that game, you're going to be feeling really, really good. You're going to be feeling really, really good. But with the season they had a year ago, I still think a loss is going to feel worse than a win would feel good. Because you win that game, we got through one test, we get Utah State next week, and then we have to do what? We got to go play who? We got to go to Michigan. Oh, we got to go play Michigan. I don't know who Michigan's quarterback is going to be. Nobody really does. But that's still a tough road environment. That's still incredibly tough. So I don't think it is ridiculous. Though normally, I would say scheduling a non-conference game like that is going to draw a lot of eyeballs is really, really fun. Interesting matchup, big storylines there. Week 1, starting the season off. No, bye week or tune up against an FCS. Yeah, all that is really, really fun. Not denying that. Tactically, though, I think USC was plenty smart and within reason in the college football landscape to say, can we try and get this game off schedule? And they couldn't do it. And it's going to be one of the most interesting non-conference games early in the year. Again, it's on a Sunday. It's Sunday, September 1st, ABC, Allegiant Stadium. You should have a majority Trojan crowd there. I would hope so. LA to Vegas, that's an easy flight. I've made it many a times. It's not expensive, and it's not very hard. So you should have a good contingent of Trojan fans there. It's going to be a fun football game regardless. But no, I don't think USC should be criticized for trying to get out of that. Lots of teams have tried to get out of that, and teams have gotten out of less challenging contests many a times before. One team on USC's schedule is Wisconsin. Where do they actually fit in the Big Ten landscape? Why don't we talk about that next? Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA with the finals right around the corner and the NHL playoffs heating up as well. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. You can bet everything you want for college football too. The season is just under 2.5 months away. Do you understand that? You can bet games, win totals, conference title odds, national championship odds. I'd lean towards Georgia there. Whatever you want, FanDuel has got it. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and our official sportsbook sponsor here at the Locked On Network. Where does Wisconsin fit in what is now a loaded Big Ten with 4 new teams? Ryan Harings, Locked On Wisconsin Badgers, joining me here to answer that question. Let's just start right there, Ryan. Where does Wisconsin fit amidst this new look 18-team Big Ten?
Right. No, I mean, it's difficult. It's difficult to know for sure, right? I think Wisconsin Badger fans know where we should fit, right? Given the last 20, 25 years of what the program has been. But let's be frank, last year was a 7-win season. A couple seasons before that weren't the greatest under Paul Chryst. There's a reason they made a move to Luke Fickell. So where should they fit? I think they slot right under the blue blood tier still, which is everyone has different definitions of this. In the Big Ten, I think that's Ohio State, Penn State. I think it's Michigan. I think it's Oregon. And maybe USC, but I tend to think USC is going to have more issues with physicality in the Big Ten than people think. So I think Wisconsin's right in that next tier is where they fit into the Big Ten. But they have a little bit of work to maintain that, and then they have a lot more work to get into that next tier.
I think on the USC physicality in the Big Ten, I don't know who doesn't think that. I'm trying to tell people that USC will be better than everybody thinks because I think they will be, and their defensive coordinator hire has been so good, but that kind of is the word on USC. Certainly not on Wisconsin, though. And I think Wisconsin and Penn State have a lot of things in common. Penn State's been at a little bit higher level consistently over the last decade or so, but we've seen Wisconsin make their fair share of Rose Bowl games. Both of those teams, both of those programs, whether it's Paul Chryst or Luke Fickell, feel very high floor, but the ceiling just isn't quite there to be a conference champion. Can Luke Fickell guide Wisconsin into that upper echelon as they incorporate all these new teams coming in as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is yes. Quite frankly and bluntly, it's yes. Now, will it happen? I don't know, but the reason you go from a Paul Chryst, and I think you described it perfectly, a very high floor coach. Paul Chryst has a really good winning percentage still, right? But it was a high floor, lower ceiling type of program, especially the way it was trending. The reason you go get a Fickell is to raise that ceiling. That's why he was brought in here. And we've already seen it from a recruiting standpoint. Last year, Fickell brought in, per recruit, the best recruiting class we've seen in 20 years at Wisconsin. This weekend, he just landed a 4-star offensive lineman with offers from Bama, a 4-star cornerback out of Florida. For the people who really followed the Badgers, followed the program, the athletes he's gotten in 2.5 years as a head coach, bringing in his recruiting department, these are guys we haven't gotten at all. And the reason it's been more of a high floor program is because we've been limited athletically on the edges, right? Cornerbacks a little shorter, a little slower, great technicians. They've been well coached, but Fickell was brought in to raise the athletic ceiling of the program. Because you know this. I mean, you've been Oregon and following the Pac-12 forever. You follow college football. You just, at some point, you just need athletes, right? All the X's and O's, it doesn't matter. Kirby Smart talks about this all the time. You just need athletes on the edges. So that's what Luke Fickell has done. He's upgraded the edges athletically, which has really been the biggest barrier for Wisconsin breaking through that tier. It's been athletes on the edges. So I think he can get them to that tier. Now, it's going to take a ton of work, and it's not going to be easy. But, yeah, I think he does raise the ceiling potentially into that realm.
You talked about the talent acquisition under Coach Fickell. Let's talk transfers, because that's a great way to acquire talent nowadays in college football. You see a lot of coaches using it in a really, really big way. How would you assess Luke Fickell's, a second full season is what he's going into over there in Madison? This transfer portal class, who are the names that stand out that could make a big impact?
Yeah, if I had to use a word, I'd say tactical, right? He really, I think this staff did a better job this offseason than last year potentially of what do we really need? Let's find specific fits. So they went out and got Oklahoma running back Tyree Walker. There was a depth issue at the running back spot. Tyree Walker had 7 touchdowns last year in the Big 12. Really good, solid player. He's going to slot in immediately, probably as the number 2 behind Ches Malusi. So that's an instant impact guy, right? If you get running back number 2 in the portal, you can plug him in right away. I say this all the time on my show. Not every portal guy should be a home run, right? There's doubles and there's singles, and that's how you win a lot of times. You improve in the depth, you improve at the 2 spot. So Tyree Walker's a big guy there. And then on the edges at outside linebacker, they brought in 2 guys. Last year's team had a lot of issues with mobile quarterbacks, getting outflanked on the edges against power run teams. They went and got John Pius and Leon Lowry, both athletic outside linebackers, so they've upgraded there. They went and got Jaheim Thomas, Arkansas's leading tackler at linebacker last year in the SEC. They brought him in. So they really revamped the athleticism on the linebacker core and then added to the running back depth, among a few other pieces. But primarily, that's where they attacked this portal, outside of the quarterback, Tyler Van Dyke.
Yeah, and Van Dyke comes over from Miami where he had, why don't we be nice and call it checkered results with Mario Cristobal and company. And, you know, there are plenty of college football fans who have their own feelings on Mario Cristobal's ability to actually develop and maximize a quarterback's potential. And it's one of the things I'm curious to see with how Cam Ward fits down there in Coral Gables. But is Van Dyke the sort of guy that Wisconsin needs to play at a good enough level? Because to compete for a conference championship, I mean, this is not a deep Big Ten conference when it comes to quarterbacks. It's very, I think it's exceedingly thin. I think you can make the case of the 4 power conferences, it is the weakest. The Big 12 is the best. The ACC's pretty darn good. The SEC's got a bunch of guys. I think the Big Ten is probably 4th. How does Tyler Van Dyke fit into that mix?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question. I agree with you. We were talking quarterback rankings on a previous show, or just kind of talking about it offline. There's not a lot of definites in this conference, right? There's a lot of young guys with potential, but that doesn't – listen, we both know how young quarterbacks with potential sometimes can go in multitudes of ways. There's not a lot of guys you know for sure. And listen, Van Dyke's in that category. You know, early in his career, he looked like a first-round pick with Miami. Really, really good. He has a rocket arm, good size, and then it just got inconsistent, right? He has issues avoiding turnovers, lost his starting job for a period last year. So I think I think the Big Ten has a very big middle area of the quarterback tier where it's just like, honestly, I don't really know. I don't know because he's either been inconsistent as a starter, or I don't know because he's been young and it's just potential. I think Van Dyke's right in that list. Now, I don't think Van Dyke is a program lifter, right? I think he's a good quarterback. I think he will probably be a good quarterback this year for the Badgers. But if the Badgers really want to win a conference championship and get into those battles, I think it's going to have to be one of the guys they recruit out of the high school ranks and then develop. I think Van Dyke is probably more of a, you know, keep the ship from hitting the sides type
a bridge quarterback, as they call it in the NFL. He's a bridge guy.
I think he's that. Which, listen, there's a lot of programs, right, where, you know, they have less than, like, you can win with bridge quarterbacks, I guess is what I'm saying, but the pieces around need to be there and performing at a pretty high clip for that to happen.
For Wisconsin, I feel like just at the outset, a win total of 6.5, according to our friends at FanDuel, is a little bit low. And then you look at the schedule, Ryan, and you go, maybe that's about right. I still feel like it's a touch low. I feel like 7.5 might be more appropriate. Like I lean towards the over here, but this is not a schedule that you look at and go, oh boy, I see 10 wins. I think 9 wins would be a phenomenal season for Luke Fickell and company. What does success look like to you in 2024?
I think you nailed it. 9 wins. So I did a show, you know, ceiling floor on the program this year. I put the ceiling at 9 wins. I think, listen, in sports, anything can happen. Maybe a TCU run happens, but if they win 9 wins in year 2 of Fickell against this schedule, that's phenomenal. Like that's progress. That's a step up. That's something you sell to recruits. That's something you use to excite alumni. That builds NIL coffers. That's a tremendous season if you get to 9 wins. My early predictions 8-4. I do think the 6.5 is low, right? I think there's a little too much pendulum shift from last year because the expectations for Fickell and his staff were sky high. And then sometimes what happens when expectations aren't met, the after result is, well, we're going to shift it the other way. And now we think this is a 6.5 win team. I think they're going to get to 7 or 8, right? Because you see big jumps in programs from year 1 to year 2 of a coaching staff. The stability's there. The schemes are in place. We know Longo's offenses can score. We know Fickell can develop guys. So I think it's probably 8 wins. 9 wins would be tremendous. I have a hard time finding 10, 11 wins with this schedule because I don't think this program's quite there yet under Luke Fickell.
Yeah, and it's kind of chunked. You start Western Michigan, South Dakota. Those are a couple wins. But then it's Alabama at home, which is a fascinating game in and of itself. We can do a whole show on that particular game, and maybe we will one day. Then it's a bye and at USC, but then you get some more winnable games: Rutgers, Northwestern, and or Purdue, Rutgers, and Northwestern. But then you play 3 tough games in a row, and it's Penn State, it's at Iowa, it's hosting Oregon, it's at Nebraska before you close with a home game against Minnesota. That's as Big Ten schedules go. Yeah, you miss Michigan. Whoop-de-freaking do, because now you got Oregon in the mix. You get the Ducks instead of the Huskies in there. I think it is challenging. I do still feel like 6.5 is just a touch low for Wisconsin, but we'll leave it there for today. On an optimistic note, Ryan Harings, Locked On Badgers. Check him out on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Ryan, thanks for stopping by.
I appreciate it, man.
Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time, and until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.